Hi, how's everybody today? How's my panel doing? Everybody's
Fine,
good?
fine.
I see a few familiar faces in the crowd. Hi, how are you? And when I'm sitting with only bankers, I must remind you we're not all bankers, so please let's try to keep this in layman's terms. So let's go ahead with the first question. In the context of various economic disparities and regulatory frameworks within Latin American countries, how can businesses adeptly navigate and optimize the M&A structures to ensure a strategic alignment and compliance, especially when acquiring companies with significant operational and cultural variances? Alejandro, please.
Thank you, Simi. First of all, let me start by saying that when investors think of LATAM, they usually think of Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Chile. And there's very different market dynamics in Central America, countries like Peru and Colombia as well. So I think investors have to keep that in mind because these countries are almost anti-cyclical sometimes, and it can be very difficult to perceive that as an outsider. What do I think is strategic to do a successful M&A from a buyer's perspective in Central America or Guatemala? I would say, having a good local partner, I think is one of the best ways to go. Because as I said, probably a lot of the market dynamics, the idiosyncrasy of the population of Guatemala or Central America, the underpenetration across different industries is probably hard to perceive for a foreigner, and that means that they probably cannot adequately see the opportunities or the risks associated with investing in any given industry. Even if you do the legal, the technical, the financial due diligence, there are some key points that you may miss. So I think having a good, strong local partner is one of the key elements of doing a successful M&A in the region.
Sean?
In my opinion, the whatever executive is overseeing the acquisition or investment in any Latin American country should ideally be from that country or from a country with very, very similar culture locally. So if you're doing a deal in Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador or one of those, you can really essentially pick any country from the Northern Triangle, have an executive from any country in the Northern Triangle oversee that deal. But you wouldn't want to have that executive oversee a deal in, say, Colombia or Argentina or Brazil, something along those lines. You don't necessarily need to have a third party, but whatever executive or whatever internal person you have overseeing that deal internally does need to be from that region, just so they can give vibe checks to everything that's going on and see whether or not everything, even if it passes, again, the legal and financial checks, can pass the smell check.
Juan?
Well, thank you. Good morning. I think that when you look at a cross-border M&A in LATAM, we share a language, but cultures are different, right? So you need to think about when you're executing a deal, the part of execution, how do I interact with my counterparty matters. How do I manage the process matters as well and can vary from country to country. So you need to think about that beforehand when you're planning. Also, it's very important that you advise yourself properly, especially with legal. So we always hire local legal counsel to help us navigate the legal framework. So that's a key. And also, if you manage to win the asset, you have to think about, well, who's going to manage it? What's going to be my business model? So if the founder is the one that's selling, he's probably not going to want to manage the business afterwards. You're just giving him a massive check, and you need to think about, well, am I going to bring someone from my company to manage that business? So it's a different culture, right? If it's cross-border, but at least he knows my business. Or do I bring someone locally? He knows the local culture, but he doesn't know my business. So there, you need to think about that as well. And I don't think there's just one way to do it. It's just a case-by-case basis.
Thank you very much, Juan. Just to add some facts, when I was preparing for this panel, I would check the top 20 deals in Latin America, and they've actually been led by Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Guatemala, and Mexico. So Guatemala is actually in the top 5 for the M&A deal making, which is very, very interesting. I like the applause. So second question, we might start with Juan, if that's okay. When considering selling a business entity through M&A in the Latin American market, how do owners ensure they are achieving optimum value and effectively communicating it? To the potential acquirers, I mean, while also managing the expectations and welfare of employees, stakeholders, and respective communities. We start with one and come back.
Okay, so I'll take the first part first, the one about the founders. If a founder is thinking about selling their business, I think one piece of advice I would give you is never sign an exclusivity. You know, buyers don't need it. If it's a serious buyer, he won't walk away if you say no to an exclusive, process. So that's just a piece of advice there, and that also gives you, more leverage when in negotiations, because you need competition to prop up price. So that goes to value, that goes to maximizing your value. Also, try and understand what your business is worth before entering a process, because it might be the case that your business is not ready yet, so maybe your expectations of value are much higher at that moment in time. And if you start a process, an M&A process, it's very time consuming, and you have a business to run also. So really think about value before starting. And in terms of the last piece of the question, which is around employees and stakeholders, in our experience, sellers really do care who they sell to. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, it's been the case for us that it's a growth story. We usually want to expand the business, so it's a very positive message. So we're able to, after we close the deal, communicate it to all the employees, reduce the anxiety, and tell them, well, actually, this is for the better, and will create more opportunities for them as well.
Thank you, Juan. Sean, anything you want to add?
Well, I would say that the key to achieving a really good financial outcome, or good outcome for your employees, community, et cetera, is making sure that whoever the buyer is has a pretty low weighted average cost of capital. Companies or buyers that have lower cost of capital can operate on a much longer time frame. They can purchase at a higher price. They can, in general, take things into account over a longer time frame, and it's just going to be much easier it's going to be much better for yourself financially, and it's going to be much better for your employees, your community, et cetera, since you're taking a long-term view as opposed to the short-term view into account.
Alejandro?
Thanks, Simi. I think from a seller's perspective, what you want to do is get the highest valuation possible, right? So I guess in order to achieve that, it all comes down to how do you negotiate your projected financial model, right? And make sure that it includes all of the potential for growth that you see in your business, and that you can adequately convey that to potential buyers, so that they buy the success story. So if you are in a scenario where you are growing at a certain rate, and there are certain things that you can implement in your business prior to selling, I would say, implement those things, procedures, the minor investments that may, move the needle the way you want it to, and let that be included in your projected model. And that adds credibility to whatever you're projecting, and that should, help you get the higher valuation possible.
Thank you, Alejandro. I think I'm being too easy on you guys. I'm going to crank it up a little bit. Sean, let's start with you for this third question. Given the notable influence of certain conglomerates in key industries within Latin America, how do regulatory bodies and smaller companies maneuver within an environment that could potentially lean towards anti-competitive practices? And how can M&A strategies be tactically deployed to dismantle or navigate through monopolistic scenarios?
So conglomerates tend to really have two big advantages over their smaller or more differentiated competitors, and that is distribution and cost of capital. And basically what I would say is you're never really going to get the advantage on cost of capital. You might be able to get advantage on distribution if you are able to have a better product. A lot of conglomerates tend to be kind of jack of all trades type deals. But if you are able to sufficiently differentiate your product and have just a much better product in the market, and if you're able to really get out there and do Well, basically just have a better product, take it to market. You can successfully win whatever product category that is away from the conglomerate. I don't really think that conglomerates in general are a regulatory issue or an anti-competitive practices issue. I tend to think that they're more basically a function of the relatively high cost of capital and relatively low trust environment that is very, very common here in Latin America.
That was very good, man. That was very good. Alejandro?
Okay. I would add, I think Sean is totally right. I would add access to financing is another barrier that probably conglomerates have much more of a competitive advantage against smaller companies. And I think, well, the financial system has a lot to do with providing financial support to small and medium companies. So I guess as we banks grow our footprint throughout different market segments and industries, I think smaller companies will have access to financing. Aside from that, aside from commercial bankers, there's also a lot of other sources of funding like venture capital and private equity, that sort of thing that is becoming much more active and common to see in the Central American region. So I would say that, and Simi, with technology and marketplaces, digital marketplaces, enhancing your onboarding digital capabilities, that's the sort of thing that allows for small companies to grow much more faster than they would have in the past. So I guess in the years going forward, we will see that small companies are able to catapult their growth through different market practices as we've seen before.
Awesome. So digital marketplaces, payment rails,
Yep.
must founders out there. Juan, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think incumbent players will always have some advantages or very big advantages to new entrants in many verticals. So, I mean, we're a big player here in some categories, but when we go to the US, we're not. And it's very difficult to get into the market, so it's not easy. It might seem unfair. I don't know if it's anti-monopolistic, but it's just you just have to, as an M&A professional, you have to deal with it, understand what the legal framework is, and manage that. I think I agree with what was said, that you need to innovate, have new products, and that's the way maybe you can take advantage of where the big guys are not properly servicing the market, but it's not an easy task.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you very much. For the sake of time, I'm going to try and put two questions together, and we'll kind of sort it out, if that's okay with you. Maybe we can leave the question open for the crowd afterwards. In the varied and multifaceted Latin American business ecosystem, how can entities, especially SMEs, construct a robust M&A strategy that not only enhances their market position, but also safeguards them against potential pitfalls, ensuring that integration or divestiture process are smooth, culturally coherent, and financially viable in the long term? You can go ahead and add a personal success story or use case. You guys hear me well? Okay, perfect. Whoever wants to start, Juan, you can go ahead.
Sure. Well, if you're a small business and you're thinking about, where you want to be in future, M&A might be something that can help you, like enter new markets or enter new verticals. It's probably not the only way, but it could benefit what you're trying to do. But what I would suggest is to look for help when implementing that strategy. So seek advisors to help you do it. I think it'll save you time. You can focus on other things, so that's I know some try to do it themselves and maybe they lose focus. So I think that I would say that. Also, if you're a founder and you're looking to sell as well, having numbers that other buyers can trust. They don't need to be profitable, but at least they can trust that the numbers are real. That is massively important, because no one will give you a premium for having accurate numbers, but they will give you a discount if they don't trust your numbers. So that's just a matter of accounting and controls, but it's worth thinking about that. In terms of a success story, I don't know if you've tried our products outside. We bought a snacks business called Popsies, which is a very innovative product, which is effectively like popcorn, like half popped. I don't know if you guys have tried it, but it's very nice. It's a very good product. The founder had, looking to sell her life had taken her into a different path, and we managed to take the business, and the business has been doing really well. And I think she would be happy to see, that product doing so well in the market because she created it, right? So
I actually know her personally very well. She's married to one of my best friends, so I'm happy you used that example. Sean?
Sure. So as far as SMEs using M&A for basically growth, capturing a greater share of the market, things of that nature, when you're talking about Latin America in general, I would say the rule for SMEs is that they tend to be undercapitalized and underscale. And both of those can be addressed by merging and combining with your competition. I'm not really a huge fan of competing away your competition. I think in general, M&A is a much faster way to get to a much better outcome for everyone involved. Everyone's going to make more money. Everyone's going to be a lot happier. But essentially finding competitors who you're in the same market with, you have the same product, you have similar distribution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you are producing, well, to go back to your company, if you're producing a food product and you can sell to a larger conglomerate that has distribution set up and has a number of other snacks already available for market, that's a really good way just for you to get either some quick cash out or get some equity in a larger venture where you're just going to be more successful in general. Or likewise, if you wanted to merge with a smaller competitor, now all of a sudden you have double the product line, you have whatever additional distribution channels they had that you didn't have before, now you have that as well. And it's just a really good, quick way to speed up your growth and speed up your development.
Thank you, Sean. Alejandro?
Thanks. As far as success stories, I think we've all seen what's happened in telcos and contact centers and the food industry in Guatemala. So I guess there's a bunch of very good transactions that we can talk about. But I would say that the key takeaway for me, if I were in front of foreign investors that potentially could put money down here in Guatemala, I would say this is a country that offers great opportunities for investment. We have excellent, legal counsel. We have excellent think tanks, excellent boutique investment bankers that are very active in, doing M&A and valuating enterprises. You have a country where you have the macroeconomic stability that, the U.S. would really like to have. And so there's a lot of opportunities for growth here, and I think Guatemala is kind of like the best untold story there is. I've had the chance of addressing investors both in Europe and the U.S., and when you tell them about Guatemala and the market dynamics and the opportunities for growth in several different sectors, they're really amazed because it's a story they've never heard. And some of them welcome that as a diversification opportunity. So I guess there's room for doing a lot of things in Guatemala. I think that we have the conditions to attract FDI. I appreciate what Sean says in terms of we need to generate the critical mass for attracting a foreign investor. And yeah, that probably means that there's a lot of room for consolidation locally, for local players that generate larger companies that could be the potential target of a foreign investor. And when the time comes, we, the banks, will be there to finance everything. So don't worry.
Well, thank you, Alejandro. We have like 45 seconds left. If there's any questions in the crowd, if you're a founder, this is your exit strategy. Come on, ask these guys questions right now or after in the networking events. But if there's any questions, I would like to see the hands raised. And so the question is, why would an investor pick Guatemala instead of a larger country, basically, if I get it right? Open-ended, whoever wants to tackle it.
Well, if I may, opportunity. I mean, there is several industries where there is a lot of growth still, and we are lacking many things, like infrastructure, for example. There's huge opportunities in investment in infrastructure. That is one of the cases. I know that we have several obstacles in terms of, some of the things that investors usually look for when going to a country. One of them, in terms of the legal system and that sort of thing. But that's why I said having a local partner is very important. And Sean also mentioned having people involved in the project that know the dynamics of the local economy. Because if you don't speak the language, if you don't know the people, if you don't know the dynamics of the market, it's going to be very difficult, and you're going to be very afraid to invest in a country like Guatemala that is little known. But if you have a good local partner, do a good valuation, there are a number of opportunities in several different industries to invest in our country.
I would say that's really going to vary on an industry by industry basis. But as far as general pros of Guatemala versus some of the other Latin American countries, relative to Mexico, Guatemala has, I would say, better courts and better security infrastructure. That right there is a massive plus. Just right off the bat, not having to deal with all of the security problems that you have to deal with in Mexico. Massive positive. There's relatively easy access to Puerto Cortes in Honduras if you are doing any kind of exporting. So right there you have easy access to one of the largest ports in Central America. That means you have easy and cheap access to the entire global market for whatever you're looking to ship out. And then of course there's relative stability of Guatemala to some of the other countries in Central America. Those are just some of the things that I look at right off the bat. And then of course there are some other countries in Latin America that have had relatively recent elections that call into question a lot of the, I'll call it political stability of the last 30 years, Colombia, Chile, places like that. And then of course Argentina is always just kind of a basket case, so, it depends on which industry that you're in, but those are just some of the positives right off the top of my head.
Juan, I'm getting the time eyes from direction, so we've got 10, 20 seconds, go for it, and then we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Very quickly, I think there's a difference between the perception of risk and actual risk for Guatemala. So I think at the moment the perception is that the risk as a country is very high, but when you're actually here and you analyze things more deeply, you realize that that's overshooting what people think the risk in Guatemala is. So that creates opportunities in terms of valuation, because valuation is still will be cheaper than what it should be. So if that makes sense. So I think that's one reason. Also, very stable currency. So we're one of the most stable currencies in the world, and it's people. So I think there's a lot of talent here, and I think it's work like a culture that's takes pride in working, and that's not irrelevant. I think that's something that has to be said, and I think we have that.
Well, Alejandro, Sean, Juan, thank you so much for your time. It was a great chat. Crowd, please stop these guys and ask them. They are top dogs in the industry. Huge applause, huge thank you, and chat with them. Trust me, I had breakfast with these guys. Go do the same. Go talk to them. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.